Is quality worth more than time? For example, is it worth going on location, or is it better to do a phone interview? Keep your audience in mind, you're doing it for them. Have the right background information so you can follow up evasive answers. Know the answers to the questions before you ask them. That's something that's drummed into lawyers, and journalists should follow that as well. Be persistent. Now that can be a little bit hard when you're starting out, but you do need to be politely persistent. If you know where your story's going, and you should, you know perhaps what answers will come your way, you know the alternate angles, then if you're being fed a line or your talent is trying to take you where you don't need to go because it's off the story, then you need to be persistent, bring them back onto the story and ask the questions again. Maybe twice, sometimes 3 times. Don't ask double-barreled questions, and in Intro to Journalism you would be aware of what double-barreled questions are. Don't ask questions that will elicit a response, a single-syllable response, yes or no. No audible affirmation. So often we hear this, yes. Well, it takes time to edit all that out. It shouldn't be heard because it can in fact be perceived by your listener as you agreeing with the talent about whatever the topic's about. If you're heading to a press conference, check your gear, of course. Make sure that you have worked out how long it's going to take you to get there. Get there as early as possible for the best position as possible. Make sure that you've got, if you're using a freestanding microphone, then you should have a little tripod or a mic stand. Perhaps there's one there. A roll of duct tape or sticky tape will get you out of trouble if all the mic stands are taken up. Then you can piggyback your mic on the other mics. Of course, you'll need to ask permission to do that. Ask well thought out questions, that's pretty obvious, even when all you want is just the grab. And so many times we see reporters and journalists at a news conference or a press conference, and they're simply there for the grab. They're not asking questions, they're just pointing their recorders or their mics at the respondent or the person being interviewed. It's a bad habit. Allow at least 15 minutes before bulletin time to have your story complete. Remember, manage your time, manage your stress. It can be very stressful. If you know that you're going to have to go live into a program, and you may well do this, then say something's happened, there's an accident on scene, you've gone out in the car, you've got your mobile phone, the presenter of the program, the producers rung you up and said, can we get a little chat with you from the scene? And of course you'll want to do that as an investigative journalist, so you'll ring into the program perhaps, and you need to make dot points of what you're going to say. You don't want to be umming and erring or I don't knowing. The news flash is another thing that you will encounter, not often these days, but it's something that you will encounter in a radio station. The news flash generally will break into normal programs, only of course for immediately important news. For instance, if a leading figure in public life, a politician or somebody was injured or killed in a plane crash, that sort of thing. When you're scripting for radio, use language that you understand, your family would understand, your audience will understand. The listener needs to be able to keep up with the whole of the story. Now, you'll be aware that stories are repeated, revisioning takes place. That's why we do that in radio, because the listener doesn't get the full idea on the first listening, usually. Not like a newspaper where you can just simply go back to an article and reread it. Accuracy, brevity, you know about those from Intro to Journalism. Accuracy particularly, of course, guarantees credibility, and brevity, well, you don't have pictures to enhance the story, you've got little time to air it, so therefore you need to be concise and brief in your language. Tone of voice, neutral. The script should be objective. We don't want any of your personal views in a story, that should be obvious. And good journos are nearly always heard reading their stories out loud because they want to be satisfied that it falls nicely on the ear, that it all makes sense. Transitions. Transitions make a story flow. For example, meanwhile, in addition to, on the other hand, also, to, but, and. Use few words, dead man instead of deceased male person, that sort of thing. When you're injecting numbers into your stories, round them out if they're large numbers. 1,435,236 penguins were later found dead on a beach or something. That's boring. So 1.5 million penguins, an awful lot of penguins, I know. Use the active voice. The car crashed into the house, not the house was crashed into by the car. Use phonetic pronunciation as Calliope, K-A-L-E-Y-E-O-P-E-E, Calliope. That's one that a lot of journalists in Queensland anyway get wrong. It's always invariably the first up, it'll be Calliope. It's Calliope. So if you're not sure of pronunciation, then phonetically print it, type it in phonetics. Network news means a reader unfamiliar with your home place names will probably get them wrong. Use the present tense. Radio news is happening now. Titles are important and should be used first in introducing the person being quoted. For example, State Coroner Bill Bloggs said, Archbishop so-and-so said. Paraphrase if you don't have a grab. For instance, Rockhampton Regional Council Mayor Brad Carter says the rate increase is inevitable given the commitments Council has made to improving traffic flows in and around the city. Radio doesn't have the visual signposts that television has, the delineators, as in a newspaper, perhaps. Therefore, your listener may take a few moments to latch on, to get up to speed, and therefore you don't start your story with an important detail. Tweak their interest, but don't give all the game away in the first par.